Hey, I want to share some thoughts about list comprehensions and ternary expressions, both of which were used in our professor's solution for our duplicates exercise. So I want to explain that, and there was a question about it. This was kind of fun for me. All right, so list comprehensions are basically one-liners that help you create a list from other lists or other containers. So let's just kind of like get onto it here. So I'm going to create a container, a variable called container, and I want to make it a set. It's just going to be the numbers 1 through 10. And if I were to have, let's say, a list of 10 numbers, and I want to create another list from that, and let's say I wanted to multiply that list by 5. Well, one way you could do that would be to create an empty list and then loop through the container, right? So you do a for loop for item and container, and then you would append, item times 5 to the list, and then, that's how you would do it. So you'd have to do this for loop. Well, you can combine the for loop into a one-liner using a list expression, list comprehension, and the syntax basically is that you use that for item in container. So it's the same body as your for loop. You get rid of your colon at the end, but instead the statement that would normally go after the colon goes before the colon, right? But you only get to use that thing in one expression. So as an example, here I could replicate that previous list by saying item times 5, right? Because your for loop here gave you access to the variable item, which, by the way, after this line goes away, you'll never be able to ask for item again. This is like the item is created and then that variable goes away, I believe. Okay, so when you say for item and container, you're creating a loop using item, the variable item, and here you're doing on the left side item times 5. But just to illustrate, I'm going to say item times 50, just so that you have two different lists, and let's see what happens. Boom, I got a name error. Why did I get a new error? Oh, because I forgot to uncomment that line. There we go. So list and a new list is that's interesting. It says class list. First, oh, that's because print list. I see. You have to be careful about your print list. The first one was list. There we go. Okay. So that makes sense. There we go. We're printing the new list, and that's how it would work. Okay. So ternary expressions. Ternary expressions are if, then, else clauses that normally take a lot of lines in Python, but if you want to have just a pretty simple, just one simple expression, if, something, then something, you could do it in one line. And the way it works is that you have if, and then the else. You have your Boolean in the middle, your truth statement goes on the left, and your false statement goes on the right. So that's kind of how it works. So here, let's say on my right side, and your left and right side don't even have to be the same type output. I could say container, okay? And that would be so what happened here? Print if true and false. Oh, okay, because true and false evaluates the false, therefore it's giving me the container, right? If this was true or false, this conditional in the middle would evaluate to true, and so this side should get printed out. And here I got a set, but if I did it again, I'm going to get the resulting is the string print if true. By the way, I am working in Google Colab, which is online Jupyter notebook, and you can play with Python. It's cool, and I'll share this, and you should practice. Okay, now what Brick did in his solution was to use the ternary in the output expression of the list comprehension to put it all in one line. So this is what came out from his solution. And if you break it down, he has the for arg in study. And by the way, when you're reading these complicated list comprehensions, I would highly recommend starting out with the right-hand side, because you want to know what the loop is. It says for arg in study. Okay, so I know there's a container called study. It's got elements in it. We're gonna go through each item in this, whatever this container is, and every time we loop through, it's going to be called arg, right? So what do we do with arg every time? Every time we evaluate the middle, okay, which is a true false. So study.count arg is greater than 1. Okay, so that means if it's a duplicate, I'm going to take my arg and I'm going to uppercase it. If it's not, I'm just going to return it as is, and I'm going to put it into this new list. So that's how this thing worked. Okay, so if we want to build something for ourselves, just to illustrate this, if else in container, let's say I have been looping on item. So let's continue to that. So for item in container, so on the left-hand side, let's start with a condition. Our condition will be if item less than 5. Okay, so if item is less than 5, we're going to put the item times 500 or 400. Okay, now also if it's greater than 5, I'm going to take item divided by 400. And then what happens? I'm going to uncomment this, and I'm going to run it. And you see that this is how you can create a conditional ternary expression for your loop. Okay. Now, this is extremely powerful, combining these two ideas, but what you'll notice is that the length of this list is going to be the exact same size as your container, because you're evaluating an expression for every item in that container. But you can also do filtering, and you do this by putting an if after your for loop. And the way that the list expression works is that if whatever is evaluated true after your for loop, then I'm going to evaluate the expression. If it's false, I'm just going to ignore that, and I'm not going to add it to the list. Okay, so as an example, we could do the exact same thing. I'm going to just take this complicated expression, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to put it to the left. So it's going to be the exact same thing as my previous for item and container, but now I'm going to have an if. And let's say I'm going to only do this for odd numbers or even numbers. So item %2, and we like this thing for even, this one for odd. But Break's got this weird thing as, you can eliminate all that together and be really super cool. And let's see what happens. I think that's the odd ones. Yeah, I think that's the odd ones. Hard to tell. You can tell me. But that's how the filtering works. And then finally, you can nest. Okay, you could do nested loops. Okay, and this is you can. The way you do it is that you have a for item in container, and then you have another loop. So this is your outer loop, and then every time you put another for, this becomes your inner loop, and then you could keep doing them as many times as you want. I think you could put your conditional here, your filtering conditional, if something, and you could put something there. I'm not going to do that. Just to illustrate that, I'm just not going to do anything with the item, but I'm just going to give item and item 2. Okay, and I'm going to return it as a tuple. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, since I don't have two different containers, I'm going to iterate it over the exact same container. Okay, so the same container is being iterated over. I believe I would need two different argument variables, because it would get confused between item and item. If I just said item and item, I think it would get messed up. Pretty sure. You could try it. But item 2 in container 2, this is the outer loop. This is the inner loop. So what I should expect is, I think this is the cross product of everything. And there you go. And the second item is the outer loop, and that's why it changes more frequently. Okay? So I hope that helps.